Welcome everyone to this month's ITA Clean Sport Education webinar on building resilience in sport. I'm Nikki Hamblin, an Olympian and a member of the education team at the ITA. Before I go any further, I do want to make sure that everyone is aware of the simultaneous translation options we have. On your Zoom menu, there is a button called Interpretation. So we will be delivering this session in English, but simultaneous translation options are available in Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish. And we are also recording all of the languages. You can also activate the automated translated captions. So select a supported language from the captions box in your Zoom menu. And please do note that these captions are translations of the original English voice, and in the case of any discrepancies, the meaning and spirit of the original English will prevail. And as always, we'll be recording this webinar, as I mentioned, in all the languages for those who are not able to attend live today. And so with that, I will now introduce today's topic, building resilience in sport. And I will now explain this in the context of anti-doping. In 2022, the World Anti-Doping Agency published a descriptive report on sports stakeholders' beliefs about athlete doping vulnerabilities and related factors. In this report, athlete vulnerability refers to the presence of factors or conditions that increase the likelihood of an athlete engaging in doping behavior. These factors can be related to individual characteristics, the athlete's environment, or specific demands and pressures of their sport. On the flip side of vulnerability, protective factors have also been identified. And a protective factor is a characteristic, a resource, or condition that reduces the likelihood of an athlete engaging in doping behavior. So protective factors can essentially buffer athletes from the risks associated with vulnerability factors and enable clean sport. So today we are going to look at the protective factor resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, stress, and setbacks. The WADA report identifies factors like a high rate of injury and intense physicality requirements of sports as vulnerabilities. Athletes who are resilient are better equipped to handle these challenges without resorting to doping. They're able to cope with injuries, performance slumps, and the pressure to constantly improve. Building resilience involves developing coping skills, problem-solving abilities, and a positive mindset, all of which can help an athlete navigate the pressures of their sport without turning to doping. So with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Talei Aldiss to this webinar. So Talei is a competitive boxer and Muay Thai fighter based in Wellington, New Zealand. Her sporting journey spans nearly 3 decades, beginning with 16 years as a national level swimmer and water polo player, followed by over 11 years and counting in combat sports. So Talei was the 2024 Wellington boxing champion, and after a 12-month break is back training in preparation for the 2025 New Zealand Championships. So beyond competition, Talei is the co-founder of Rikers Boxing Academy, a boxing gym focused on developing grassroots talent and building strong communities throughout sport. Today, Talei will share her experience of building resilience, which she has described as a deeply personal theme, through the setbacks and challenges she's faced and then overcome throughout her sport career. And she will also answer questions from you at the end. So please do use the Q&A function if anything pops up in your mind. And I'm really happy to say we had our first question for you, Talei, within 30 seconds of starting the webinar. So we will come to those at the end. But with that, Talei, over to you. I'm going to pass you the virtual microphone.
Thank you, Nikki. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining For me, it's the evening, but I am excited to have the opportunity to talk with you about building resilience, what it is, why it matters, and how I have managed to strengthen my own resilience during my sporting career. Think of resilience as the roots of a tree. The deeper and stronger they are, the better you can withstand life's storms. So in simple terms, I like to think of the application of resilience as the ability to adapt, recover, and grow in the face of challenges. It's what allows you to maintain a positive outlook and grow, and even when life throws unexpected obstacles your way, when you have resilience, you can tap into your inner strength to bounce back from setbacks, whether it's an injury, poor performance, a loss, or any other adversity. This mindset not only helps with problem solving, but it also helps keep you motivated to move forward. Firstly, I'd like to share a bit about my own journey and what I've learned along the way. So at 4 years old, I started swimming lessons. My parents were convinced I would be an Olympian because I loved the water so much. Spoiler, I did not make the Olympics. But at 10, I started competing in both swimming and water polo. At 14 years old, I represented New Zealand in water polo and won gold at the Pan Pacifics. Then at 20, I retired from both swimming and water polo and spent the next 5 years without any sport. In that time, I felt really lost. I tried to focus on my study and building a career. However, I didn't feel like I had any purpose. Then at 26, I watched my dad compete in a charity boxing event. And I was so inspired watching these everyday people get in the ring in front of an audience of 1,000 and pushing themselves mentally and physically. So the very next week, I signed up to a local boxing gym, and 6 months later, I had my very first fight. Then at 33, I transitioned into Muay Thai, now competing in both sports. So I've got a video which is just going to show what the last 11 years of competition have looked like for me. So for me, I've had challenges every step of the way, but I don't necessarily view these as bad things. I believe part of the reason that I've been able to compete, not only at an elite level, but also at an age where other athletes are thinking about retirement, is because I have built my resilience to view challenges, setbacks, and obstacles as opportunities for me to grow. For the last few years of boxing, well, for the first few years of boxing, actually, I had the challenge of learning a new sport, along with a new lifestyle as well. Boxing is a weight-based sport, which comes with some trial and error to find a weight category that your body best competes at. So for me, I've competed in weight classes spanning 15 kilos or 33 pounds, which is quite a significant range. With weight loss and weight gain, I've had to do a lot of homework to tailor my nutrition to fuel my body for training and meet my weight goals. I don't have access to nutritionists and other professionals unless I pay for them. So I have to be disciplined to do my own research and plan and make my meals in advance. I don't earn much money at all through boxing. So I work full time on top of training before and after work. Being disciplined with setting a routine and being prepared is truly the difference between success and failure when it comes to meals and training. Unfortunately, this hasn't been the easiest thing for me to master. For about 7 years, I trained in an environment which glorified overtraining. I was constantly fighting in a weight class which was so light, I wasn't able to maintain outside of competition. I dealt with this by significantly under-eating, and I was training for upwards of 4 hours a day. On weigh-in days, I was taught how to dehydrate through salt baths. I believe that that's an incredibly irresponsible method for athletes without specialist support. And also keeping in mind at this point in my career, I was amateur and only competing at a national level. So what happened was in 2023, the lifestyle I had been leading led to significant burnout. I had a torn calf, a torn elbow ligament, and 2 worn out shoulders, which both needed surgery. I learned that what I had been doing wasn't working. And as you can see from these photos, I look really unwell. I was miserable. I hated boxing. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere in my career. I had huge goals and I felt I had little support in achieving them. I felt old. I was always in pain. I was always cold and I was always tired. I had little energy to do anything in my personal life, and even my work suffered because I felt so lackluster. The easiest thing I could have done was give up. I'd had a reasonable career up to that point. It may not have been standout, but I'd still had some noteworthy performances. But I knew in my heart I wouldn't be okay throwing in the towel just yet. There were many moments that led to the realization that I was in burnout. The first was this constant feeling of not having any direction or support in the growth of my career. I'd had some honest conversations with my coach. I came to these conversations prepared, and I shared a document that I'd created with my short, medium, and long-term goals. I asked for feedback. I asked for advice on how I can further my career. And in my coach's eyes, I asked, what did I need to show or achieve that would propel me forward to a professional level? I genuinely felt that the support that I needed from my coach was not there. I consistently lacked feedback and clear direction. And in fact, when I was ultimately approached to go professional, my coach told me that I would need to find my own opponent, which is a highly unusual practice, and he was unable to attend that fight night. I'd given 7 years of blood, sweat, and tears under this coach, and I felt completely overlooked and abandoned. I didn't leave immediately. However, I did sit with it for a few months, and I knew in my heart it was time for me to move on. For me, I wasn't going to achieve what I needed to in this gym, and I needed to be responsible for looking after myself. But moving gyms wasn't going to solve my relationship with overtraining and undereating, and it wasn't going to rehab my many injuries. So what was my response? Firstly, I withdrew my membership to the gym. I needed to prioritize my health and my career. Despite uncertainty about the next steps, I knew I needed to be courageous to move forward. I took an entire year off even thinking about training and boxing. I knew that a year in the sporting world at my grand age of 36 was going to be really tough when I returned. But realistically, if I didn't take time out of my career, it was over anyway, because my mind and my body were in such poor shape. I booked in my surgeries to fix my long-term injuries. I sought out a fantastic strength and conditioning coach, which is something I had never done before. And with this coach, I've created a plan that works with my surgeries and my recovery, and it would set me up for success when I did start competing again. This plan included rest and recovery sessions, which are non-negotiable. So I must schedule these around my training. It's completely different to what my reality was like before. I allowed myself to gain weight and I stopped weighing myself. While this isn't sustainable for a boxing career, it was the first time in a decade where my day didn't start with stressing over the grams showing on the scale. It provided me room to repair my relationship with food, increase my calories, and begin to tailor a performance-centric diet without the pressure of weight loss or maintenance. Rather than searching for a new training home, I leaned on the support of my husband, who incidentally is a boxing coach, but never at the same club as me. And we created our own club, which would promote all of the positive attributes that we wanted to see in a gym environment. So on the screen are key pillars of resilience: energy, future focus, inner drive, thinking flexibly, and strong relationships. You need balance across all of these areas to prop up your own resilience. I'll be honest, I went through my struggles and I didn't realize I was resilient. On reflection of my journey, setbacks, and my response to them, I absolutely took strength from each of these pillars to keep me upright. For me, it was my inner drive that wouldn't accept the conditions that I was in. My future focus knew if I kept doing the same thing, I wouldn't physically be able to further my career. My flexible thinking and leaning on those closest to me helped me strategize and create a new pathway. And all of this fueled my energy and reignited my excitement for the sport. So when I was in my burnout phase, I had 4 choices. I could keep doing what I had been doing and stay in the same cycle. I could do the same thing, but somewhere else and stay in the same cycle. I could give up, or I could move on, learn, and grow. So if I didn't have resilience, I could have looked at my situation and seen it as an unfair setback. I could have thought, this always happens to me. I'm never going to get ahead. I could have let myself feel defeated by my situation. I could have allowed myself to stay frustrated and let fear take over instead of looking for solutions. I could have complained, blamed others, stayed stuck in self-pity. But it was my choice to move on, to face the unknown, take responsibility for my future, and rebuild from a place of purpose. And all of this proved that I have all of the components of resilience. So on the screen are attributes we all have. We might be weaker in one area, but they're skills that we can actually teach ourselves. It's not an overnight process. And how I built my resilience, I wasn't necessarily deliberately building my resilience. Over the years of my career, I believe I was building my resilience without even realizing it. So on the screen are some of the things that I've done over my career that I truly believe have helped me become who I am today. The first was realistic goal setting, breaking my big goals into smaller, manageable steps, being flexible with my goals, adjusting the plans without losing sight of my why, having self-awareness and reflecting. I did that by journaling, which would help me track my thoughts, track my progress, and reflect on my emotions. It would allow me to check in with myself, what is working, what's draining me, and practicing mindfulness. Reframing the way I spoke to myself to be positive was tough, but little changes you can make by replacing I can't with I'm learning how to. Reframing setbacks as lessons rather than failures, and practicing self-compassion, talking to yourself like a coach or a teammate would. I truly, truly believe that celebrating the achievements of others helps you become very settled in who you are. The only real competition we have is ourselves. When we push ourselves against others, it's a negative focus. It takes our focus away from what we can do, what we can control to better our performance and output. And lastly, I believe I built my resilience through learning from my setbacks. So analyzing what went wrong rather than blaming myself for not doing so well. Asking myself, what did I learn? Or how would I do that differently next time? And also celebrating my growth. Even if the outcome wasn't perfect, if it was better than it was before, that's a win. I especially recommend John Kehoe to a lot of people, athletes and non-athletes alike. John Kehoe's book, Mind Power, has had a huge amount of mind activities you can easily incorporate into everyday life. It is a book that will take time to work through if you do it properly. I've personally adapted mantras, which I say in my head and out loud. I say it in the car, in the mirror, in the bathroom. I say it out loud when I'm at training, or if I'm running, I'll say my mantra as well. It changes from time to time, but it generally sits along the lines of I am strong, I am fit, I am smart. The change that this has had to help me compartmentalize tough moments during a fight or even at training has been immeasurable.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlie. I feel like you spoke to so many things that are so relatable to myself and I hope to other people in our audience as well. Your honesty in sharing your journey, your acknowledgement of the realities of different athletes. And I think I'm feeling especially inspired about how you realized it wasn't working for you. So you sought your own path. And that's really hard to do when you're the first one. You don't have anyone to follow through that. But I also love, how you're giving back, I guess, through creating your boxing gym and building this around the values and the things that you see as valuable in sport and supporting others, I guess, to follow your pathway in the ways that you've done or you now are doing things that maybe you weren't doing for the first few years of your career. So before we do go to our questions from our audience, so just a reminder, the Q&A box is open if you have any questions for Talei. I do actually have a couple of questions of my own. And the first one is, so speaking directly, I guess, to the athletes that are in our audience with us today, who would like to, interested in building their resilience, they see this as something that they could work on. If you could recommend a first step, what would that be for an athlete to build their resilience?
I think John Kehoe's book would be a first step, just because of the huge amount of activities it has in there for mental training. I think it's really important to understand when we're talking about building resilience, what are you looking at in terms of your career that you're needing resilience in? Is it, you're so nervous or you can't handle competition, or can you not get up at 5 a.m. to go for a run? Do you like being comfortable? And actually understanding specifically what it is can be really, really powerful to help change your mindset around that component.
Awesome. Thank you. So if I'm challenged to get up at 5 a.m. to go for a run, that's where I need to build my resilience in. So thank you. Awesome. So my next question is, I guess, relevant to people who support athletes. Like we know we have coaches in attendance today and other athlete support personnel. But if an athlete comes to their coach, comes to their medical professional, comes to their parent, comes to their strength and conditioning coach, for example, and says to them, I want to build my resilience, can you help me? How can the support person help an athlete themselves build resilience? And I know that you mentioned your husband is a great support, and so you may like to draw from that experience, but I'm also wondering about how you support others to build their resilience, I guess maybe drawing from your mentorship, coaching, ownership role of your boxing gym.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. Because it is, I think, quite tough when you're trying to support an athlete. I think the most important component in supporting an athlete who's wanting to become more resilient or grow within themselves is creating an environment where failure is okay, failure is an absolute reality for everyone. But it doesn't mean you failed. It means it's a learning opportunity. It's a time in which you can look at and say, okay, what didn't go well and how can I learn from this and grow? And I think that's really important as a coach to be able to objectively look at maybe an athlete's performance and say, okay, this part here didn't go so well. So let's focus on building on that. Or maybe you've got an athlete who isn't turning up to training, isn't maybe looking like they're very dedicated, but it might not actually be because they're not dedicated. It might be that they don't have the resilience to understand why training is so important, why showing up is so important, and how doing, I guess, the foundation really can propel your career forward. A lot of people, I think, get stuck on not realizing that there's this huge world of opportunity, but the bottom line is applying yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Talei. Okay, so we are going to jump over to the questions from our audience now. So the first one, as I mentioned, came in the first 30 seconds of the webinar today, and it was from Jewel. And they said, what daily habits or routines can athletes follow to build mental resilience and stay motivated during difficult training periods?
Very good question. One I think I actually personally have a lot of experience in as well. I think keeping a consistent routine is the best thing you can do. So if you wake up at 5 a.m. to go to training, you wake up at 5 a.m. every day, because the days that you have to be up for training, it's no longer such a struggle getting out of bed. For me, I'm very, very routine based, and I feel like when I don't have routine, I can feel a little bit out of control. So really having a relatively consistent weekly schedule of, okay, on Sundays, I go grocery shopping and I meal prep. And that way I know what my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is going to look like for my nutrition. And then I'm getting up at the same time, or I'm going to bed at the same time. Most of the time, you still need to allow for some life in there.
Awesome, thank you. Because you also mentioned, just picking up on what you spoke about in your presentation around like your journaling as well, and those kind of routines. So yes, Jewel, and I guess Talei, I guess, expanded on some of the things she already talked about in her presentation. But I think there's lots of, I guess there's lots of nuggets, lots of little things that can be done. But I guess the important thing is that the person who wants to build their resilience, who wants to stay motivated, I guess, works out and figures out what those things are for them, what those triggers are for them to help them stay motivated and keep a routine. And Talei, I particularly liked how you just mentioned, on Sunday when you do your meal prep, like how that makes it maybe a bit easier for you in the first half of the week. It's like pre-preparing to make everything run smoother.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe on to our next question. So this is Dr. Rajesh, and I'm assuming this is related to you, Talei, being involved in a combat sport, which are often, I guess, associated with anger. You're fighting, essentially. So his question is, how do you control your anger? But I feel like maybe we want to take a step back first and ask, is anger something that you feel either in competition or you felt throughout your journey? And then if you have, or if you do, like, what do you do about that?
Anger isn't something personally for me that I've experienced. But especially with combat sport, you get punched in the face a lot. And for the first few years when I started training and fighting, I would leave training crying. I'd spend so much time crying because I felt like all I was doing was getting beaten up the whole time. And I didn't think that I was, I guess, giving out as much as I was getting. Um, I didn't feel like I was really progressing or that I was had any skill. So for me, that was obviously a lack of confidence. But I just kept showing up. And along along the journey, I started to look at situations where I might get hit squarely in the face and go, okay, what do I need to do in that situation to not get hit in the face? Is there a movement that I need to think about doing? Is, reframing that situation as a little learning experience. And I even do that in fights. Very high intensity. There's a lot of noise in your brain when you're fighting, but I'm still able to go, okay, I've got hit with that shot. I'd like to not get hit with that shot again. So what do I need to do differently?
Thank you, Talei. I think it's fascinating to get an insight into that side of things, being inside your head slightly when you're in the ring or in the arena. Yeah, it's fascinating to understand some of your thought process. So now we'll move on to a question from Esan. So the question is, how long would it typically take for an athlete to recover mentally from a serious injury? I want to start by saying I think it depends. It depends on who the athlete is. It depends on their support network. It depends on many different factors. But Talei, maybe because you mentioned your calf, you mentioned your elbow, you mentioned your shoulders. Maybe you can share your experience of, I guess, not just the physical recovery from those injuries, but I guess your mental recovery as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting situation because everyone is going to have a different reaction to it. When I tore the ligament in my elbow, I was training and my arm essentially just went dead. And um, I kept training, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but I'm so used to pain at that point that I just thought I'll just complete my training session, I'll get it sorted. Um, I actually didn't have any time off, but what I did do was stop using that arm. So I was still doing burpees with everyone, but I just didn't use that arm. Um, when I tore my calf, again, that I did that at training and I rested it for a week and then literally hopped back to the gym and just focused on doing work that only used my upper body. So I was like sitting on the floor doing overhead weights and things like that. So um maybe not sensible, but it was just the reframing my situation as mentally I felt like I wanted to be at the gym. Physically, I couldn't train normally. So what was I going to do to allow myself to keep training yet not injure myself further? So it was just kind of reframing what training would look like for a while.
Yeah, and I think we in I guess the mental health space of injuries, we often hear that or what tends to happen is an athlete gets injured and then they step out of their familiar environment, their supportive environment of their coach, of their training partners, of their friends, often. So I think it is really nice and a really good learning point that you shared around, I guess, keeping connected to your community as well. Like, yes, it was about training, but it's also the routine, it's also the relationships, it's also the not just sitting on your couch maybe sometimes and worrying and mulling and thinking what if. It's kind of keeping those connections, keeping those relationships, and keeping, I guess, some of that routine as well.
Yeah, yeah. And just to build on from that point as well, when I had my surgeries last year, and I took 12 months off from boxing, um, while that was still removed from the sport, that's when I had my strength and conditioning coach. So I was still going to the gym, just in a different capacity. And the view was different as well, because this time it was really focusing on what can I do to make myself stronger for when I do go back to boxing eventually. Um, it was hard. It was definitely hard, but keeping, I think, the focus on the future and my goal really, really helped keep everything flowing in that time.
Thanks, Charlie. Okay, we'll jump to the next question from Adriana. And she has said, what would you do if you cannot change clubs due to the limited or accessibility of training, I guess, venues or places? So I guess it's quite a specific thing that maybe you didn't experience because you did have a different option, or you made a different option for yourself. But Tali, do you have any advice or any tips or experiences that you can draw on that you could share with Adriana?
I think it's really important to know why you would be considering leaving, regardless of if there were other options or not. And if you say, I want to stay at this club because I really love the people, but I feel like my direction is missing, then what can you do? What can you control to have those conversations with your coach to say, you know, these are my goals. Um, I need help achieving them, but what do you need from me? And, in my case, I did really, really love my gym. I really did love my coach. But I knew that I wasn't going to propel my career forward the way I wanted it to by staying in the same place. Um, so if even if I stayed, it wasn't going to happen. So I had to go. So it's really, really important to know, you know, what are you not happy about and what can you control?
Thank you. That's some really nice advice. Okay, so we're going to go to a question from Esan, and this is quite an interesting one as well. I think asking about how can athletes distinguish between healthy stress and destructive stress. So I think, typically we need a bit of stress, healthy stress. It helps us get up for training. It helps us perform when we need to. But Tali, have you ever experienced, have you experienced both sides of this? How do you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, again, a really fantastic question. And I have experience in both kinds of stress. I think the difference between healthy stress and negative stress is the feeling that you have after the event. So for me, there are some days where I am so tired and all I want to do is sit on the couch. I don't want to go to training. I'm not looking forward to it. I don't want to be doing sprints. I know what's coming and I'm like my mindset's really negative. Um, but I go and I'm there and I'm really proud of myself and I love it and I have a great time. Um, whereas I've had times where I've already worked out for 2 hours that day, and I've just had an 8 hour day at work, and I've really limited my calories, and I'm not feeling good, and I don't want to be there, and I go, and I still don't feel good, and that I would class as negative stress, but it's a negative stress because I wasn't fueling my body correctly. Um, so there was a whole lot of things that I could control in that environment. So it's very, very personal, I think, from person to person. But at the end of it, I think it's truly the feeling that you have within yourself after the event. How do you feel? And if you're not feeling good, what can you control or what can you change to make the outcome better?
Awesome. Thank you, Talei. You talked about underfueling, which is a nice, I think, segue into this next question from Iro. And they've asked, as for the diet, what are some of the non-negotiables in your weekly diet? I guess particularly around maintaining healthy ligaments and joints, considering those are maybe the vulnerability points for injuries. So maybe, Talei, you can speak to, I guess, your experience and how you build your diet. And of course, we'll recognize that a diet is very individualized, and it should be, because each person is different. Each person has different fueling needs, different sports, different levels of sport, lots of differences. So a diet should be specific to that person. But Talei, maybe you can speak about your diet.
Yes, so it is obviously very specific to me. The biggest change that I've had to make is actually eating, full stop, which is very sad. My non-negotiables are hitting my protein goals per week, actually making sure I'm eating my breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the meal and the snacks around those as well. Completely allowing myself to have treats. I think that's really important to have some flexibility in your diet, unless there's a true goal that you're working towards. But I think it's understanding what your output is, what your goals are, and then looking at your diet holistically and understanding, what different vegetables can do to help you meet those goals, or what different meats you can eat to help meet those goals. There's so many recipes and variables out there that you can work with. But yeah, I think it's just understanding the non-negotiable is understanding exactly where you are and what your goals are.
Thanks, Talei. We have another question from Esan. What habits or routines can athletes adopt to build emotional and psychological resilience? I think we've touched on a few of the different options that you used, Talei. But maybe if there's anything that you wanted to add to anything that add anything to what you've already said.
No, I think the only addition I would add in there, we've spoken about routine. When we're talking about building mental resilience, I noted that I use mantras. And I think if you have the confidence to start saying your mantras out loud at training and making that habit, that can be really, really powerful. So I definitely recommend an athlete try that.
Thanks, Talei. So our next question from Christina is in Spanish, but my trusty colleagues have translated it for me. And so Christina says, have you ever been tempted to use substances to achieve results in sport?
Short answer, no. Long answer, still no. But the reason that I've never been tempted is because I completely understand the risks associated with using substances. Obviously, the first being a failed drug test, which could be a ban from sport. But I think the most important, in my personal view, is the health consequences that you can be doing to yourself without understanding or feeling that happen. There's a story that I really love to tell people about my dad. He was a powerlifter when I was growing up, and he used to compete often. And all of a sudden, he pulled out of the sport and just would train at home, wasn't competing anymore. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I realized, he used to compete a lot and now you don't. And he said for him, it was the rife substance abuse in the sport that really made him dislike being in the sport. He didn't want to be around it. He didn't want to be associated with it. But he said there were two guys in particular he knew were taking steroids, and he followed their career after he left the sport. And both of them had some pretty good careers in powerlifting, but both of them had massive heart attacks in their early 40s and died. And I always think about that as, you train so hard and you want to compete and achieve amazing things. But what's the point if you're going to die early? You can't, live the rest of your life and enjoy what you've achieved and enjoy having a life outside of sport.
Thanks, Talei, and yeah, thanks, I guess, for sharing that story as well. It's really I think it has impact when it's a real story. It's something that actually happened, and it's real. It's not just a consequence that someone will tell you about. It's not a bullet point on a slide. It's really happened, and your family or your dad experienced that from being in the sport and following these athletes through. So maybe we've got some more questions, so we'll keep going for another 5 minutes or so, but we'll go to Aubrey Yan's question, and they have said, do you think some athletes are not able to be resilient, essentially?
No, I think everyone has the ability to become resilient, but you need to have the discipline to work on your resilience to grow it. And if you don't have resilience, if you don't have discipline, then maybe sport's not for you.
Yep, that's a great answer. And I think this next question from Diana also kind of relates to this, about I guess the fundamentals that need to maybe come before the resilience piece. Like, it's not just an easy thing. But Diana has asked, how do we bring this into the perspective of preteens and younger athletes who are still learning how to navigate emotions and maybe at the start of their mental resilience journey? So Talei, experience of preteens and younger athletes.
I love this question because I just feel so passionate about building the younger generations, because I don't necessarily think I had some good role models when I was younger. I think the most important thing is framing the journey as a journey and looking at those mini wins as huge wins, little areas of growth being a really positive thing. Stop focusing on, winning a race, winning an event, because that's actually not what's important. The important part is that athlete's growth. And I think when we can teach younger kids to start looking at those situations with a growth mindset, it'll really change their perception of sport and their careers when they're older.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. Just from my own experience, like I wish someone had told me that, or maybe I wish I had listened if someone had told me that, because maybe someone did tell me that when I was a young athlete. But I think the message about the journey, about achieving an Olympic gold medal, that's not going to be the thing that ultimately makes you happy. right? It's the moments along the way, it's the relationships that you build, it's the small achievements along the path that must be celebrated, you know, by the people around the athlete, but also internally as an athlete as well. And I honestly was not very good at that when I was competing. So thanks, Talei and Diana. I hope that helps, and I hope you can take that back, assuming that you work with young athletes, and help them with that. Or just you know, show them the recording of this webinar and Talei's answer. That would also be good. So we're going to go to Faris Dak's question, and this is quite specific to your sport, Talei, I guess. So how do you feel when you face strong competitors, and how do you overcome any fear that you may experience as you go into a fight?
Yeah, this has been a journey for me to get comfortable with someone else's strength. A lot of it is reframing every interaction. So if I get punched really hard, you know, being able to compartmentalize that and go, okay, yeah, that was a hard punch, but I can still see, I can still hear. I'm not dead. I haven't passed out. But there was actually a fight that I had a couple of years ago against someone who was very, very strong, and she punched me, and I saw 5 of her, and then she punched me again, and it was on my left ear, and I lost the hearing in my ear for about 2 months. And then she punched me again, and I felt my teeth move, and I thought, my teeth have fallen out. I can see 5 of her, and I can't hear out one side of my ear. But luckily the bell went, and I went back to the corner, and I said to my coach, you know, I can't see, I can't hear. And he said to me, I don't care. You're going to get back out there and you're going to do it. And at that moment, I knew, yeah, that's right. I have been training. I'm fit, I'm strong, my mantra. And I went back out there, and I just had to go, I can do this. And it was one of the best performances I ever had. And it was truly because I had that mantra going in my head the whole fight. And I had a coach that knew what my mantra was. So I think that's really important to kind of have the self-confidence that you've been building through your training sessions, and then really digging deep in that moment where you're feeling like everything is against you.
Okay, and you did just mention your coach in that answer, so it does relate to our next question, and I think it will be our final question today because we are very, very close to being out of time. But Nathia says, what are the 3, I guess, best traits of the best coach that you've had?
I can think of some really good traits that I've experienced from some coaches. One being the growth mindset of, okay, this didn't work. And that was, so what's next? How are we going to do that differently? I really, really think that's so powerful to when you've got a coach saying, yeah, that didn't work, but that's not a failure, that's a lesson. I think some other really, really good traits is actually having your coach turn up on time to training. Setting the precedence that you must be at training if you want to compete, because otherwise you're not ready to compete, and keeping that really fair across all the athletes. So there's a level that everyone must be at the gym, and that's how you rise up together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Charlie. Thank you for all the for your presentation, for the responses that you've given to the questions. They've been really awesome, and I feel like I've definitely learned stuff. I hope our audience, I'm sure our audience has too. I've seen some really nice messages come through in the chat about how interesting it is to hear your journey, so that's awesome. So I do just want to spend 30 seconds wrapping up today. So I want to acknowledge that we haven't, I guess, covered what I would call a typical anti-doping topic. But I did just want to close us off by relating back to the WADA report that was introduced at the beginning. And this report implicitly supports the concept of resilience as a protective factor against doping in sport. So in ourselves, in our communities, it's important to build resilience as it can help athletes better navigate the pressures of sport without turning to doping. As I just mentioned, Talei inspired me today. I hope she also inspired you as well. And you're going to leave the webinar with some tips, some ideas about, I guess, how to build resilience, in your communities and in yourselves as well. So a big thank you to Talei for joining us today, for your honesty, for sharing your experiences. It's really powerful. And thank you to our audience for joining us today. Thank you for your great questions. I acknowledge we didn't get to all of them. So if you do still have questions that you would like answered, you can always email us at education@ita.sport. So that just leaves me to say thank you to everyone again. Thank you, Talei. I think it's 2 minutes past midnight in New Zealand. So a good night to you and everyone else. A good rest of your day, good evening, good night. And we hope to see you online next month. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Talei.
Thank you.